this year, okay, then I realized this year, go to sleep one night, wake up the next day, it's a national holiday. That's bad. And I realized that people don't really understand the story of Texas Juneteenth. I mean, we know that general history, we don't know the story of Texas. Thank you. Comanche Crossing is the old community that my ancestors came from. This would be 75 miles south of Dallas, 160 miles north of Houston. The counties that Comanche Crossing are in would be Limestone County, Texas. My family is from Limestone County, Freestone County, which is right next door, and Navarro County, Texas. They all are joined right together. They're bordered together. We grew up with Juneteenth. I was riding horses when I was 6 years old at the Juneteenth celebrations before I really understood what it was about. I'm 74, so you can't do the math. So my first Juneteenth celebration that I was even aware of was when I was 3 or 4, only because there's a picture of me on a horse at the celebration, all right? So this goes back quite a while with me. As I grew up and got to be a teenager, I got interested in my family history because, like many of you, especially on my father's side, he had 11 brothers and sisters, and they had a lot of children, so I have a lot of first cousins and so forth, and now they are grandparents. But my uncles and aunts used to get together, sometimes all of them would be together, and they would tell these stories. So they would tell these stories about my grandfather, who was born in 1880, and my grandfather would tell me stories about Juneteenth, about his mother. So when people, in my opinion, when people start talking about, oh, slavery so long ago, why don't you leave it alone? I'm thinking, if I'm sitting down and listening to my grandfather tell me stories about his mother, that's only 1 or 2 degrees of separation. That's not so long ago. He's giving me primary source information. And my family name was Reynuald. So when I grew up, everybody called me Reynuald. Now, let's go to the next slide, because I can't remember where we're going here.
Let me interrupt for a second. Don't get confused. He's Reynuald Smith. I'm Reginald Smith. We're not related to each other.
They won't get confused because I'm kind of looking you up.
He has more years to age.
Comanche Crossing is now Menace, Texas. Maybe some people have heard of it. Some people, when they see it, they call it Mexia, but it's Menace. It's a Spanish name because the history is this particular community was owned, the majority of the land was owned by a former Mexican general who actually changed sides and fought with Texas in the Texas-Mexican War. And his name was, well, it would be pronounced Mejia if it was Hispanic, but we call it Menace, Texas. Menace, Texas is where Comanche Crossing used to be. Why Comanche Crossing? The majority of Native Americans in this part of Texas before they disappeared were Comanches, and they call this area Comanche Crossing. Next slide. See what I can fill in from, try to get that. Again, so I grew up as a kid hearing about Juneteenth. In my family, and in many families that we all grew up, my family moved to Dallas. I went to elementary school, junior high, high school with people who came from the same area my family came from. There was not a big celebration for the July 4th holiday. I don't remember a big deal being made about July 4th. I don't remember anybody using it as a protest or anything like that, but I don't ever remember a celebration because there's so much proximity between Juneteenth and July 4th. That was our Emancipation Day. So if I can get to the slides.
Yeah, can share. There's so much information on that slide, so heavy.
Is that the next one?
Yeah.
Okay.
You're on camera, so just a couple of.
Okay. Where my family was from, you might not be able to see it clearly. Navarro County, Freestone County, Limestone County. This is my family right here. All right. And this was what a lot of people don't understand. This was the epicenter of Juneteenth. Now, when people go back and do research about Juneteenth, you're going to hear a lot about Houston, which is down here. You're going to hear a lot about Galveston, which is down here. All right. But the epicenter of Juneteenth was right in this particular area right here. Next slide. This is a little historical background on how slaveries were packed in Texas. Slavery in Texas was only in this portion. It was not out in the Western territory was like no man's land, all right? So that my area, my family area is right about here. You can kind of see the way the population is. This is as of 1860. You notice this real black area right here. That means that in that particular county, over 80% of the people were slaves. So that meant that's all there was there. These counties right here, this is Harris County. That's where Houston is located. This is, I forgot, Brazoria County right here on the coast. So the majority of slaves that were in Texas prior to the Civil War were tended to be located in this area. And it made sense. It was closer to the Gulf and the transportation of cotton and all that kind of stuff. All right. But this is where my family is. So that was a sizable number of slaves in that particular location. I'm a school teacher and I'd rather talk like this. All right, go. Next slide, please. Is that the next slide? You sure? Okay, if that's the next slide, no matter, I'll make it work. I'll make it work.
You can move the next one.
This is General Gordon Granger. So when you read the history, you say that Gordon Granger was the guy who arrived with the Union troops in Galveston, Texas, June 19, 1865, to read General Order Number 3, which is very short. It's only about 3 or 4 sentences, to let the slaves know that they were free. So I just wanted to give you a picture of what he looked like. Okay, next slide. This particular place is called Ashton, Ashton Villa. This is where the order was first read from, Ashton Villa in Galveston, Texas. Now, what a lot of people don't know, again, General Order Number 3, I can read it to you in 1.5 minutes. We'll be finished with it. Read it from there. That's the symbolic location. Then he, along with soldiers, went out into the town, into the community of Galveston, and they read it at different locations. The first Black church they went to is today called Reedy, R-E-E-D-Y, Reedy A-M-E Chapel. He read it at that particular church. It was not called Reedy in 1865, but it's called Reedy now. Same location, building updated and that sort of thing. But he read it there. Now, again, a lot of people get the general idea that General Order Number 3 was read in one place. This order was written out, originally it was handwritten. Then it was printed up and it was sent out all over East Texas. So there were some people who may have gotten that information at one point in time. Some people got it at another point in time, and another point in time. And to be Juneteenth is that symbolic date. Some people got it June 20th. Some people got it June 21st, 2nd, 3rd, and on down the line. Because Texas is so spread out. Some people didn't get it at all, not right away at all. And they were still being held as slaves because their slave masters didn't share that information. And part of it, not exclusively, all of it. Part of it was because they wanted to hold them for another crop. It was the amount of money. Now, so when these Union soldiers, it was 2,000 that came to Galveston. That's still not a lot. But even if you talk about East Texas, those 2,000 can't get around all over East Texas on June the 19th. That is just physically impossible. So there were a lot of slaves that even got it later than that. So June the 19th becomes a symbolic day. Oh, this is Old Galveston. This building right here doesn't exist anymore. It's called Osterman, the Osterman building, Osterman. Osterman, maybe I'm mispronouncing. Osterman building right here. It was read there at that particular point. It was read by General Granger at the Custom House. So he went to all of these different locations. Now let me tell you, the slide presentation I put together last night. So I'm working on this as we go on and eventually put a narrative on the page with the picture. So this is all rush. Okay, keep going. The original General Order number 3. This is what it looked like. Okay, so it was handwritten, and now I get back to my family. Well, go to the next slide. I think the next slide is the General Order number 3 that we can see. There we go. This is all it was. So about, you read it in a minute or two, you went to somewhere else. Now for my family got this information from the front porch of the slave owners that owned my relatives. And I'm gonna get to that in just a second. But when you read this, what's important to me is, let me see, starting at this sentence right here. The freedmen are advised to remain quietly at their present home and work for wages. They are informed that they will not be allowed to collect at military posts and that they will not be supported in idleness. Don't you dare not be working, either there or elsewhere. So the really underlying message here is, you guys may be free, but don't think you're gonna just leave and move away and do whatever you wanted to do. However, slaves did. I'm gonna get to that in a second. Keep going. This is the slave owner and his wife that owned my family. This is Logan Stroud. I can't even remember his wife's name. I told you I put this together hastily. Logan Stroud. So this story I've had for 7, 8 years. I presented this story at the family. We had a Smith family reunion back in 2013. I'm telling this story then. So again, it seems so funny to me that all of a sudden this is an important story to tell. I thought it was just a family story to tell. All right? But Logan Stroud and his wife, Logan Stroud came from Mississippi and Georgia. The other thing about Texas and doing genealogy and research is very few when you go back in Texas, you eventually will have to leave Texas because remember, nothing was there. There was a Mexican government, and the story goes that the Mexican government were trying to recruit people to populate the state of Texas. That's where the hassle between the Anglos and the Mexicans came in. Stephen F. Austin, who Austin, Texas is named after, began recruiting people from the deep South. So when you do genealogical history as an African American in Texas, you will be able to go back. Let's say you're lucky to just keep going. Once you get to around 1820s and before, your family will then be from Mississippi, Georgia, Alabama, or whatever. They came to Texas from that point. So that's the connection right there. So in doing my family history now, I'm at a point now where I can't go any further back unless I'm doing trees, little branches. I can't go any further back in the main families The main families, now I've got to shift to Mississippi and Georgia and start looking up people. And that is slavery. And you know, when you get to that point, names don't necessarily appear. You just may be listed as an item. Okay, keep going, kiddo. That's the front porch. The actual front porch where members of my family stood. Logan Stroud owned about 150 slaves. Where members of my family were congregated right here to listen to Logan Stroud read General Order number 3. Now, the history in Texas is, and some of you may be very interested in this, and when you go back and look it up, you're gonna see that what I say is actually correct. It's absolutely correct. The story goes that Logan Stroud is reading this, as you can see, it's very short. He can't stop, he can't finish it, he breaks down and starts crying. Oh, my poor slaves. What's going to happen to my poor slave? His daughter had to finish reading General Order number 3. Now, when you read Texas history, you will be familiar with this description. When you read Texas history, he's described as a caring slave owner. That's an oxymoron to me. I don't know how you can be that. He's a caring slave owner, and his slaves looked up to him and they loved him. Well, I'm gonna give you some proof about that in a second. All right, next. Now, throughout Texas, once Juneteenth started being celebrated, which took place somewhere about 1866, 1867, because this had to set in, this new change right away had set in. In many locations, the slaves got together, former slaves got together and pooled their monies within the 2 or 3 years right after Juneteenth and bought property. They bought property for them to celebrate Juneteenth without being hassled. So this will be our property and our place. In Houston, it was called Emancipation Park. In Austin, it was called Emancipation Park. In Comanche Crossing in Mahair, where my family's from, it was called Booker T. Washington Park. Now, you may not be able to read this, but this date says 1898. That's when they officially were deeded that land. But they had been celebrating on that land from 1867 to 1898. So, but occasionally they were harassed by whites saying, you know, no, you can't do this here, you can't do that. But once they purchased that land, it became theirs. There's still a committee today that owns that property. Some of my family members are on that committee. And one of my family members was on the original committee. His name was Joseph P. Apples. And he was born in 1820. All right. Next. Go, yeah, right there. This picture, you can find this picture online anyway. I needed to find a picture that was kind of representative. This is not Comanche Crossing. This is Austin, Texas. So I wanted to give you a picture. Austin, Texas. Around 1867, 1868. Juneteenth to those people in that area, in Texas, was not fun and games, really. You didn't have Juneteenth and you shoot guns and firecrackers. It was not about that. It was going to church. Juneteenth was a spiritual event. So the early Juneteenth celebrations in the late 1800s were events where people put on their Sunday finest and they went to wherever they went to not celebrate Juneteenth, but to kind of acknowledge it. Now, if I can remember, again, I'm 74. So when I was like 10 or 12, I remember being down in the country at relatives' houses who were then in their 90s. And I started doing the math the other night saying, that would put them being born somewhere around either between 1867 and 1877. So these are people who parents went through this, all right? And so I used to listen to these stories, and I was so surprised that when I got older and was in college, all this knowledge was still in my mind, in my head. I just never pursued it until I got older. But they were constantly talking about Juneteenth. There was a story about Juneteenth babies. That meant some people, let's say that there is a lady who is a slave, and let's say she's pregnant at the time that she hears about Juneteenth. Her baby is going to be born the first child in our family in freedom. In freedom. Now, we can get cynical about this, and I've already heard some professors and people talking about Juneteenth. Well, Juneteenth didn't settle anything. You still had sharecropping. You still had Ku Klux Klan. You still had Jim Crow. You still had that and all that. But I can tell you, folks, I've been at the knees and at the feet of these people talking. None of that mattered to them. They didn't care about that. What they cared about was that day. On that day, I'm not going to get whipped anymore. I'm going to be able to do this. Of course, there were struggles yet to come, and maybe some of them were even worse. But for them, those elders of that day who witnessed that, that was like God coming from the heaven and saying, it's all over. You got it. You can do it. So those initial celebrations were all spiritual, mostly spiritual. As time went by and we got kind of the turn of the century, early 1900s, they became more celebratory. Next. Right there. One of the original buildings built at Comanche Crossing Park where Juneteenth took place. Notice it's a tabernacle. Wasn't a party house. It was a church. It was you come and you worship and you pay honor to your ancestors and pay honor to the fact that you are the one who gets to see this first step into freedom, even though it was very ambiguous as to what freedom was. You're making this first step. And those children that were born either right before Juneteenth or right after Juneteenth, in some of those communities, those were special children. Now I can remember this being about, again, somewhere between 10 and 13. Because I used to go in the summers, I would go down to these places every weekend. And then I would stay a couple of weeks because my grandparents were still alive. And so I'd be on the farm. I thought it was the coolest place to be in the world. Yeah. But again, listening, my family name was Ryan. Everybody called me Ryan. Listening to people say, Ryan, Uncle so-and-so was a Juneteenth baby. And what does that mean? And then they started explaining it to me. So I got to see people who were wearing that around as a badge of courage, a badge of honor, that they were a Juneteenth baby. Because I was the first in the line of the family to be born outside of slavery. So that's interesting. And this is one of the first buildings built at Booker T. Washington Park for the celebration of Juneteenth. It is not there anymore. Okay, it's gone. Next. Okay, one of the other Earths. I'm sorry. Okay, sure. Well, Booker T. Washington was revered and honored by everybody. It's just like asking, what's the connection of Frederick Douglass to all other Black people? That he was somebody that everybody looked up to. And remember this, the park was not officially deeded until 1898. So they had been celebrating on there from 1866 to 1898. So who will we name? Sit down and think about it. How many Booker T. Washington things that are named after Booker T. Washington? So he was very revered, especially at the turn of the century. Okay. Oh, yes, this is just another building on the grounds right here. All right, keep going. Again, this is more up to date. This is Comanche Crossing, this is Booker T. Washington Park, and that little body of water right here, that's Lake Menace. When they first purchased it, it was no lake. All right, it was 30 acres. It's now 20 acres because as time went by, they built a man-made lake. And that is it. But here's the cool thing. What you're looking at is land that belongs to us. So we own it, we run it, we cut the yard and do all that stuff. We keep it up. That's Booker T. Washington Park. All right, keep going. Again, just a little more modern version. You know, you see Juneteenth at Comanche Crossing. It's really Menace, Texas, but that's the ancestral name, Comanche Crossing. All right, keep going. Oh yeah, have you all ever seen this soda? Well, Big Red soda was bottled by is bottled by Dr. Pepper. It's not distributed on the East Coast, so if you want one, it's very hard to find. And in 1930, I may be off a year or two, somewhere between 1935 and 37, Big Red was created. It became the official, unofficial soda of choice at Juneteenth in Texas. So when you go to Texas, you better ask for Big Red, because that was what people drank at Juneteenth. And I wasn't thinking about it today. I ordered, very sweet, very bubble gum. Yeah. I ordered a 24 case of Big Red from Amazon. They sell everything. The books are,
I'm not seeing your face.
oh, they're not seeing the face. So I just ordered a 24 case of it because of all this Juneteenth got in my head. But you go to Texas, you have to, everybody has Big Red. Everybody. So it just became associated with Juneteenth. All right. And those staple things, you know, fried chicken, there were bake-offs, there were quilting bees, horse racing, baseball games, everything, family reunions where people had, when you get into the 1900s, people had left the area and migrated to Dallas, Houston, wherever. And in Texas, there was a big migration that went west to California. There are a lot of Texas people in Southern California. And a lot of people grew up with Juneteenth because they took it with them when they migrated to California. So they also migrated to Oklahoma and Arkansas. So the Texas migration pattern is a little different than the Deep South, which followed the Mississippi straight up Detroit, Cleveland, Chicago, and that sort of thing. Okay. I just put this up for those who are really interested in doing a little more research. There's a lady named Doris Hollis Pemberton, who is from this area, who wrote a book called Juneteenth at Comanche Crossing. So whenever you hear these stories about Juneteenth anywhere else in Texas, that's Juneteenth light, L-I-T-E. This is the real Juneteenth. Back in the early 1900s, I'm not kidding, you can look it up and find it's true. 20 to 30,000 people would be in that park celebrating Juneteenth. Now, I'm going to tell you this line that my grandfather told me, but I'm going to take one word out and you'll know what the word is. My grandfather used to say, Ronnie, there were so many Black people, but he didn't say black. He said, Ronnie, there were so many Black people there that you throw a rock and jump in there and wouldn't get the ground. That was the story my grandfather used to say about the Juneteenth celebration. I just spoke a month ago, I'm still doing research. I discovered that I have a relative named John Smith who lives down in this area. I called him. He's 91. So we had a discussion. That means he's born in the 30s sometime. So we're talking. So I said, John, what can you tell me about Juneteenth? And he started just laughing. Juneteenth? What can I tell you? What can I not tell you about Juneteenth? I remember when my daddy, we didn't have nothing. My daddy and my mother, we would get in a wagon, which would be sometimes in the late 30s, in the wagon and ride over to Comanche Crossing. My mother would fry chicken all night, bake cakes, and we would go over. And in Texas, Juneteenth is not one day. I don't care where it falls in the week. Juneteenth is like a 2 or 3 day. And these people would come all around that would camp. They meant to stay, so they would camp and stay there and enjoy themselves. And that's how a lot of people reconnected. There were people who reconnected long after Juneteenth. Your mother's who? Oh, wait a minute, my aunt is so-and-so, and so forth and so on. Got a quick story. I just thought about this. This is my uncle who lives in Los Angeles. He's 87, just turned 87. My father's youngest brother. So we all talk, we still talk, and I'm getting stories from him. He said, Ronnie, I used to go to Juneteenth celebration. He was the last on the farm. Everybody else had left. Ronnie, I used to go to Juneteenth celebration, and I'd bring these girls. My uncle is a real good looking guy. I used to have these girlfriends, and I'd bring them to Juneteenth celebration. And Mama would say, come here, boy. Don't you know that's your cousin? It's like Albany, like Sandy Spring, same thing. But it was such a close community. And I know he's exaggerating. He said, I kept bringing so many girlfriends by the house and they were all related to me. He said, I had to leave. By the time he was 18, he moved to Dallas and then he joined the Air Force. He left. Okay, next. This is Miss Pemberton who wrote the book. Yeah. And the book is very interesting. It goes into much more detail than I can share. Okay, next slide. Okay, go to the next slide and let me see what this is leading to. Okay, now you can go back. Now this is a sidebar story. The last official battle of the Civil War was fought in Texas. Again, because of, I'm gonna get to you. Again, because of the communication problem. Lee surrendered in April. The information didn't get to Texas, and there was a battle fought in May, and it was called Pimento Ranch, the Pimento Ranch battle. 2 days. It was 12th and 13th, or 13th and 14th, 2 days. The irony in this is the Confederates won, but the war was already over. The Confederates won the war. But the interesting thing, and I just found this out, the interesting thing is the Union soldiers in that battle were made up of 200 plus colored troops. So I thought that was a kind of irony. The last battle of the Civil War fought in Texas, Juneteenth, these Black soldiers fighting in Texas. It was the 62nd Infantry. I'm having to catch you, I just want to finish. It was the 62nd Colored Infantry. These are members of the 62nd Colored Infantry. Now, you might not be able to tell, and the caption that, many of them have books in their hand. The caption that should be under here was, they were at school. Their commanding officer, this white gentleman, there were no Black infantry or groups that were manned by Black officers, they were manned by white officers. The white officer gave an ultimatum to them, to the non-commissioned officers. Now these guys are former slaves. All you non-commissioned officers who have not learned how to read and write by a certain date will be busted and you will be kicked down in ranks. So all of these guys started learning how to read and started learning how to write. Now you're gonna love this story, it's good. Started reading and learning how to write. By the end of the war, this particular unit was identified as having the highest literacy rate of a colored unit in the Civil War. Go to the next slide. The 62nd Infantry and the 65th Infantry are the troops that founded Lincoln University in Jefferson City, Missouri. Now, there's a Lincoln in Pennsylvania, but there's also an HBCU in Missouri. Lincoln University in Jefferson City, Missouri. This is a monument on the campus of Jefferson City, Missouri in honor of the 62nd Infantry and the 65th, which were merged together. And it had to do with that order that they be made to learn how to read and write. And those two groups ended up founding Lincoln University. I just thought that was such a cool story. Question.
When did the last battle take place?
1865. Oh, is that it? Oh, that's easy. Okay. Let me see what's next, because I don't remember. Okay, this is just history. I wasn't going to even mention this. You want to know why Six Flags Over Texas? This is going way back. 6 different groups ran Texas. Spain, France, Mexico. Don't forget, Texas was independent for about 9 years. It was its own country. That's why it has the 1 star on the flag. And if you read about Texas politics, that's why it acts like an ass.
Yeah. Be careful, someone's gonna get it.
Oh, yeah. Then they became a part of the Confederacy, and then ultimately they became a part of the United States. There where your Six Flags came from. Right. So whatever's next, we're gonna stop right there.
Right.
So, okay, I'm really got to run. I may not be able to entertain a lot of questions. To summarize this, Juneteenth was not so much celebratory initially as it was paying homage. It was like a church revival. All right. It was paying just the respect to who Jesus, God, whatever religious deity they believed in, that they were just so happy that they no longer had to wake up in slavery anymore. And the definition of what took place after General Order Number 3 was read in Texas, it was called the scatter. So that order about staying where you are didn't mean anything to most of those black people. It was called the scatter. People went everywhere. People went to the West. Some of the male former slaves in the West went, in the eastern part of Texas, went western part of Texas, and became the people we now know as cowboys. And then when the white slave owners were going to fight in war, Texas didn't rely only on cotton. Texas had a diversified economy: cattle raising, pigs, hogs, sheep, corn. When they left to go to war, the cattle just ran off astray. When they came back, many of those former black slaves, male slaves, were able to negotiate a little better life than some others by being cowboys, to go rustle up those cattle and bring them back. Because then after the Civil War, cattle raising became really big in Texas. And that's where you get the story about the cowboy. I'm sorry, I'm through.
Yeah, I'm looking for you. Okay, one question, because they're also waiting for you up there. No?
I know, yeah.
Right.
He had his hand up.
First, I'd like to say thank you for the story. This has been the great Juneteenth celebration that I could ever have on this particular day, this time, with the great information. The question I have for you, are you familiar with the history of Slocum, Texas?
I know Slocum, Texas, but I'm not sure what you're getting at.
Oh, just how prosperous that particular town was and what happened.
Well, I'll tell you what, let's do it this way.
Yes, Kat.
I'm gonna give you my card. I don't know the answer, but I'm gonna look it up.
Okay. Thank you.
And you can get in contact with me.
Right.
Okay.
I do know what the young man just said. This is just historic.
there's so much more that I can
Yes,
share.
indeed.
The question is, Tuskegee alum, are you going to, your book is next, right? Is that-
Well, we'll see. We'll see.
Because, I mean, this is just, like, we're hearing all of the information about this day, but this for me is just wide open. It's more, it's deeper dive than what we've been hearing.
But see now what's happening? What's happening now is like a lot of things. As the generations have gone by, the one cousin I said I talked to was 90, my uncle was 87. Those are kind of the, and this isn't everybody's thing. Those are like the last little connections we have to that different period of time. And once they go, if the story hadn't been told, then it ain't gonna be told. And so what I'm doing is taping people, you know, trying to find out as much, just let them tell their story. Because if you let people, you know, a lot of people say, oh, but grandma never would talk. Well, you never let her talk. You never asked the right question. Yeah, that's the thing. If you ask her questions about herself, grandma, what were you like as a little girl? What were you starve and stuff like that? Pretty soon, she's gonna start just spilling the beans. She's gonna start talking. And we got to document and save that stuff. And so if you have seniors in your family, put them on tape, record them, and yeah.
We need a big round of applause before we head something. Decided we'll have pockets of meeting, and as you many of us know, especially many of us from the new immigrants, we need to have those conversations. That's one of the reasons why we are holding this event. There are some of the folks who are far near, who have questions. We invite them to pocket conversations with them. The Vice Chancellor of the Technical University with the Wakanda project is here. We wanted to quickly respond before you leave, but you will have that recorded because I know you have to head to the o'clock. Yes, and what we're going to do is we're going to have those who offered to engage with you and the museum to have a pocket conversation. You know, because this is just the beginning, as you rightly said. You know, this is just the beginning. You know, so give him a big round of applause.
But again, another point is, this is just so fascinating to me because I was telling this story to relatives, just not even thinking about it, you know, months ago, and it was just us talking. But now all of a sudden it's become the holiday du jour. And so, so you just talk, yeah.
We need to have you on a TV program for the nation to see.
I wouldn't mind.
But
But you know what? I tell you what, I bet is gonna happen between now and next year. You're gonna start getting other people from Texas saying, oh, well, people are interested in this. And they're gonna start coming out and telling us, because this is not unique to me. This is not unique to me. I just happen to be doing this research and the holidays popped up. That's all. Well, thank you.
We do have a few eminent guests among us. Some of them are probably it's about 9 o'clock in Belgium or 10 o'clock now, I guess. And we have the Vice Chancellor of the University College of the Technical University of Cape Coast, Professor Josh, on the line. Laura, if you can do the gallery view to see those on the right. And I know that you've got them all muted, so you probably ask him to unmute. The intention of today was to celebrate. You labeled it celebration, education, connection. Okay. And I had a conversation with a number of my colleagues, especially the Catholic colleagues, and my mates, Dela, who's here. And the intention was not to have a heavy, long conversation, but to celebrate and use this occasion to express solidarity with our folks. It is often, it's often assumed that our history, and when we came over here, history was almost always starting from slavery. We knew for a fact that there was a lot more before slavery. There were lots of what I call the great African empires. And I was a little curious when I came, and that was the narrative. But I also quickly realized that the history that the folks of Sandy Spring are living, the tragedy of being slaves, is also part of my story. So I need to own that. So the story of our individual people should be seen as a whole and not each of us picking and choosing to divide us. So the aspiration of using this day is to bring us all together to realize that it is one and the same story. We are people of the continent, the mother continent. And there are a few of our members who have a few words to share with us. Josh he's a reverend. Josh and I grew up as kids on the University of Cape Coast campus. And and he is now heading the Technical University of Cape Coast. And the interesting thing is that there has been an attempt by a number of diasporans to return to the continent using the idea of Marcus Garvey, which is to say that, you know, our Muslim brothers have Mecca, our Jewish brothers have Jerusalem. What do we have? They want to use Cape Coast and Mina, where close to 70 to 80% of our brothers and sisters who were sent across came from, as the Mecca for the diaspora. So they are starting with the idea of the Wakanda city of return, you know, and this Wakanda city of return, of course, it sounds like some gimmicky Hollywood thing, but the reality is that the Wakanda story is as real as anything you can find on a continent. A genuine community and commitment that the African community has is something that is very infectious. And we want to revive that by making it possible for people to go there. So Josh is part of that project, and he has a message for us. Can we get him on? Is he? He left?
Yeah,
He's coming back, yeah. And one of the problems we face is that I always told my people that when the pandemic started, that so when the Lord sent out the disciples, they went door to door. But now we have to go Zoom to Zoom. but we have to master it, you know, and in many places it's a tricky thing getting connections on Zoom. So how are we doing? His mic needs to be worked. Okay, keep working on that. In the meantime, can you pop up? I know we have some folks who are also waiting to. Josh, okay, pop up there. Let's see. Okay, let me just invite my African colleagues down here, African Catholic colleagues down here. You know, so I know they all have one or two things to say. I will get Josh on soon. Azemasi? He's on? Oh, okay. Let's okay. Can you spotlight him?
Hello.
Yes, we can hear you now. Perfect. Spotlight him.
Okay, excellent. Let me first of all thank you for the invitation to celebrate Juneteenth with you. I think, albeit you've taken a lot of what I wanted to see out of my mouth. Anyhow, thank you for the invitation. With non-celebrating Juneteenth, you invited me. I'm speaking from Cape Coast, and I think as Albert said, one of the castles located here in Cape Coast. Cape Coast is close to Elmina, which also is one of the slave castles, and many of the slaves were shipped through these, were passed through these castles. And 2019, I think, was a year of time where we had many Americans to Ghana, and I think we're right just about to have the after return in 2020 when COVID set in. And I think that for those of you who haven't been to the continent, I think you must visit, because I think that our destinies are interwoven. The Black man cannot succeed except the Black man, the diaspora, and the Black man on the continent work together. We're working together. Interesting, I have the opportunity to celebrate
Okay, Josh. So this is what we ask you to do. I know you really have something to say for us, more detail. So what I will suggest is that you send that pre-recorded, and we'll share it on our website and share it to all those who attended this meeting. The connection, as usual, is a little spotty, but thank you for making the time. And I know that we have a lot of work to do, and you partnering with the Wakanda initiative is one big plus. We have to get our Cape Coast virtual community on board as well. And I know they are gradually coming on board to be part of this wonderful initiative. So thank you for making time. I know we have a number of folks who are calling from a distance, so I may want to move to them. Can you pop up the list shortly so that I can do? I think I can pull it up here. See. Someone tell me it's child labor. I'm exploiting my daughter. Scroll it up. Scroll it up. Scroll it up. Yeah. Scroll it up. I want a list of the names. So scroll down. Sorry. Okay. All right. Right. So I mean, what we have is that we have a wonderful lady. Akide, I don't know whether she's on, but she came to us via a connection that I had at the United Nations. And when our former president, Jerry John Rawlings, visited the Caribbean or the Trinidad for the Emancipation Day. And that visit, from all indication, was a very historic one because it reconnected the efforts to start the process of healing. You know, and that trip has become part and parcel of how the Caribbean celebrate Emancipation Day. They try to link us all up. And so Cape Coast has also started an emancipation, or what we call the Panafest. You know, it becomes an opportunity more to reconnect the people of the African diaspora. And as many of you know, Marcus Mosaic Garvey was the one who came up with the Black Star that Nkrumah took, you know, and Nkrumah acknowledged the fact that the continent is only going to be healed if we all could get together, and he was fighting for African unity. So the intention of us coming together is part and parcel of the dream of Marcus Garvey, the Pan-African dream, to bring as many of us together as possible. So I don't think we have Akide on it. Is she? No. But she's a very, she calls herself, what's the title again? Let me read it up here. She's the president of the African Women's Organization and a representative of the Emancipation Support Committee for Trinidad and Tobago. And an interesting component of her work is the fact that many a times the role of women, and I come from a matrilineal society, the role of women are reduced to, as you know, I don't need to go in there, but he's emphasizing that the agenda that has been hijacked from the African woman is not the same as what is referred to as the feminist agenda. And he's trying to infuse that because the load on the continent is really carried by mostly women. But I'll give her a chance, like I said, for her to also record her message and hand it over to us. But I have a couple of folks who are in Brussels and then Glasgow, and we have our champagne also on board. And I know they have a little bit of crunch time, so let's probably do a quick round robin. Let's see. Let's start with us, the Ghanaians. We go to the champagne, the head of the family of the Jan Johnson. So if you can get him on. Yeah, Kofi, you're on. Unmute yourself. Yeah, mute yourself, please. Yeah. You're still muted. And I got to mute myself. Huh? You're asking for a meeting? Yes. Okay. You're on.
Okay, thank you, Albert, Governor, and thank you also for inviting me. As he indicated, that big word in front of me, Champagne, just means patriarch or Anumabo. I mean, we have a very large family. Most of them are in Ghana, but the bulk which are here, I've been appointed that we get together and everything. And we are very much interested in this program that we want to connect with African Americans here. The last time the Sandy Spring had a Black and Black online movie, later I went back and took an inventory, and I was surprised to see that my 8 years as a program director for University of Michigan International Programs, I took 139 African-American students to Ghana. These were programs that University of Michigan and Ghanaian University had a collaboration. One of them was what we call Global Intercultural Experience for undergraduates. Basically, what Ghanaian professors, they go on work research. But I made a concerted effort that would take about a week off to visit this slave castle so they can learn about their history. And I was glad I was able to do that for over almost 10-year period. And another thing, we are very proud about Anumabo. Anumabo is a small town, but it's this year the first capital of Gold Coast before it went to Cape Coast, and now Accra is the capital of Ghana. So we've done very well. One of the industrial sons of Anumabo is James Emmanuel Kwejir Agre. I'm sure most of you have heard his name before. He came to United States back in the 1800s, went to Salisbury, Maryland, Livingston College. Got married to African American. One of his sons even became an American State Department ambassador to several African countries. Yeah, so John Johnson and family, we are ready to help as much as possible. We know the connection is there. And as they say, Ghana, the hospitality of Ghana is second to none in the African continent. I can know that. I've traveled extensively all over Africa. I do breast cancer research. I did work at University of Michigan Medical School for 21 years. I'm now with Cornell University in New York. So I've traveled all over. So we would like to do this comment. This is a program, initiative that my nephew, Albert, who is down in Maryland area, we're going to work with this center, but whatever we do to open our arms and welcome you to Ghana. So that's the comments I have right now. And I'll let the other panel also to speak. If anybody has some kind of questions, I'm going to stay on until we finish. Thank you, Albert, for organizing and for inviting me.
And another interesting hat that I wear is my faith, and something I wear on my sleeve, and it's with my Catholic faith. And then you know what is in the news today, Almasi. It's almost dividing our church at the moment. It's hard, but and this is where we come in as Africans, because this agenda that is getting divisive should never really be dividing the church. Rather than take the floor to say anything, Ademasi is he's a president emeritus of the first attempt to unite all African Catholics in the USA. And that's been going on almost close to 10 years now. The current president, she was planning to be on Sally Stubble. And the intention we had, and I don't want to take the win out of the sail of the mouse, is that there is the hesitation of engaging in this conversation when we are not ready. That is their reservation. Okay. And I'm saying that we are never going to break if we're going to wait for that. But I will probably give the floor to Ademasi to share a few words. But the intention is that we African Catholics are on board with this agenda of bringing the African diaspora together and advance the cause of getting rid of some of the ills that take our society. So Ademasi, you have the floor. Good afternoon. As Albert mentioned, I am the President Emeritus of NACOS, National Association of African Catholics in the United States. Actually, I'm the first president. I was the first president, and I've been there for about 9 years. So that was that. And now we have Sally Stover, who is continuing. I'll come back to that. But what has been, the story of my journey here. Yes, linked to the Catholic Church, but it will never have been without St. Augustine. And that's St. Augustine Catholic Church, which is the oldest African-American Catholic church in the DMV area. And we just celebrated our 163rd anniversary. That church was created by former slaves who could not find room in the Catholic Church. They would not worship in the Catholic Church, so they were, I guess I'll call it, banished to the basement of the church. And so when you read the history of St. Augustine, then you start understanding the struggle for what I'll call the Black Catholic, I would say, journey in the United States. Now, I'm bringing that up because I joined that church by mere chance. And this will bring me to how I got to discover Juneteenth. Well, I was an assistant manager in a store in Alexandria. Just one day, one lady comes to me and said, "I heard you are from the Congo." At that time, it was still called Zaire. I was from Zaire and said, "Yes." She said, "Okay, can you please come to my church? Seriously, can you please come to my church because I have really something that I want to find out." Where she took me was to Imani Temple. Imani Temple was created by, Reverend Stone. And what he was using was something that was taken from the Zaire rite that was accepted by Rome at that time. So he kept telling people, what you are witnessing is an authentic African way of celebrating Mass. Now, you know that at that time he had left the Catholic Church. Now, I went there and I saw it. I told the lady, "Yes, you're right. That's part of the Zaire rite. The only difference is that here you're using the real bread. In Zaire, we still use the Eucharist." And then she said, "Well, let me now take you to the church where he used to be before he started this." And she took me the following Sunday to St. Augustine. And that was in 1991. I went to that church and I never left. And, for that, I had been, I was actually honored to be the chair of the African Diaspora Ministry in that church for about 19 years. So that ministry was created by African Americans who started seeing a number of Africans coming to church and talking to others. Actually, the person who created it was in the Carter administration, and his name was Ernest Withers. And Ernest Withers is a very, very known name, especially in the South. If you go to Arkansas, you know. But he created that ministry, and the mission was to actually welcome the unchurched Africans who were in the DC area and who could not find a church home. So you have to think about African Americans created to welcome Africans to the point where now an African is the head of that ministry and, in an African American Catholic church. Now, it's that way that I started learning, because I will talk about the whole thing. And I discovered, actually my first boss here was an African American that I met in that church, Mr. Lennon. His soul, his soul in this time he died, but with him we worked in Africa, Gabon, and the DRC and things like, so he was really into that. But he started welcoming me into his family. So it's with him that I went to Chicago for the first time. I stayed at his house, actually his sister's house, and I discovered celebrations of Africans and African Americans together. And that started my adventure here. So 2001, I went to Texas. That was my adventure year. I was a student at that time, so I would just go into my car and drive. And 2001, I find myself in Houston during this period. As Ray had said, Houston, they don't celebrate Juneteenth on June 19th. It's a whole week. And that's where I started. So I started going back to Houston every year. But for 3 years, I would go to Houston to celebrate Juneteenth. And I'm learning. And it's through that I've come to this point where, when this thing about Africans, we will say, I am because we are. That spirit of Ubuntu, there's a core, that started coming in because without the African Americans, probably I wouldn't be working in my field of expertise because my boss took me there. But the other one, I wouldn't have discovered who the African Americans are with. And that's where my love for the history and what actually makes us one started. I will gloss over what I have been able to do in terms of bringing us together to come to this point. As I head now the advocacy ministry, or here it's the advocacy committee of the National Association of African Catholics, my intent, my objective has always been, how do we fit all of us together? How do we fight all of us together to advance whatever it is? So here I discover this museum that is doing this job, and I'm saying this, you're gonna hear from us.
Certainly.
As the person who has the blessing of heading the advocacy ministry or the advocacy job of the African Catholics, I think my desire and my conviction that without all of us being together, we are not going to end anywhere. I can say, I know Sandy is no longer here, and I will say
Hear that recording.
You hear about what we have to talk about. To start from questioning the whitewashing of images in Catholic churches, right? Which is the same as here. What is that on the continent? So we're going to talk about that. We're going to talk about what we as a people have gone through, but what we can accomplish together. So
Thank you very much. And I was going to use the to connect the link that we have with Emira, but I know Emira said you said almost everything that she wanted to say. But Emira has been helping us bring the Africa Advocacy Network together, and that's a think tank of groups that are working to change policy in Washington. And one that we're working on now is still the COVID vaccine. So if you haven't seen it, add your voice to that. There is one other person who has, I think she's raised her hand to Laura. She said she wants to speak. She's ready. Lydia, she's also part of a gang. Lydia, are you ready? She's multitasking. She's driving, but I know. You can unmute yourself, Lydia. Thanks for making time. She was here before early with the nephew. They had some good time before they head to the next agenda. This is Juneteenth. Okay.
Thank you.
Perfect. Go ahead.
Today was my first time at the museum, and it will not be my last. It was truly a pleasure and a joy. Thank you for this opportunity. to stand with my sisters and brothers around the world. I am Lydia Curtis, Executive Director of Siddiqui Educational Safari in Washington, D.C., whose mission is to elevate, celebrate, and empower young people through the art, history, and culture of Africa. I first want to acknowledge the land stolen from indigenous people who first called these lands home, and the massive wealth unjustly created on these stolen lands. We are all here today to acknowledge our mothers and fathers and fellow human beings brought here in chains and bred here and enslaved to create what is now we call the United States of America. This is Anacostan and Piscataway land, and we honor these people in this moment. And the museum so beautifully captured those souls in the slave ships and in the other structures outside. We at Siddiqui stand in support of the Sandy Springs Slave Museum and its partners in the celebration of Juneteenth, a holiday for African Americans that honors the day that the Union Army arrived in Galveston, Texas, June 19th, 1865, to liberate Black people still held in bondage 2 years and 5 months after the Emancipation Proclamation was signed. This is the perfect opportunity to celebrate the release of our ancestors and to remember what they went through. It is also a great time to teach people about African American history and culture. We are a part of the African diaspora. There are 200 million of us diasporans, and we have about 1,250,000,000 sisters and brothers on the continent of Africa. We must dialogue together to teach and learn about each other. Why don't we start today? We stand with the people of Haiti, many of whom trace their ancestry to the Congo and Senegal in their ongoing fight for liberation. We stand with the people of Cuba, where almost 4 million of our Black and brown diasporans live, for an end to the blockade. And right here in Maryland, we stand with the Bethesda African Cemetery Coalition under the leadership of Marsha Coleman Adebayo, who today is celebrating Juneteenth on the property where some of our ancestors were buried and disinterred. She and her group are fighting the owners to keep the last few bones of our ancestors from being disturbed. And we can all help with that too. These are just a few examples. Black people have been fighting for liberation ever since we got here. We are struggling in Colombia and Brazil and in the southern states right here in the United States. We at Siddiqui stand in solidarity with liberation struggles around the world where people are fighting against imperialism and greed, oppression, apartheid, and daily terror just for being themselves. Let us come together today to celebrate the unbreakable bonds that we need to create a just and equitable world. Ubuntu and Asante Sana.
Thank you. As you can see, I'm multitasking, trying to get some feedback to those who are on a very short time. But this is one thing that I need to share. There are a few of you are here, and I hope you can stay a little longer and share your thoughts with us. But there was just a couple of weeks ago, there was an attempt to bring as many of the fraternities of the schools in Cape Coast together to form what they call the Superfold, an umbrella organization. Do you see Frimpong or any, I don't know what name he's going on there. But what is happening is that I spent 25 years of my life in the shadows of the dungeons of Elmina and Cape Coast Castle, never really looking at that grave sin of slavery, you know, and having brought those who schooled, and Cape Coast is where most of the secondary schools are. So many of them are here, and they come together to form an umbrella organization. And this is one agenda item that they want to jump behind and to be part of the process of healing. They have a prepared message, a collective prepared message. Not seeing them, they were on at the beginning. It's the Frimpong, or let's see, any of the schools. Yeah, anyway. Okay. So this is what I'll do. We have a couple of folks in the UK and in Ghana that are on the line that I want us to go to. I think the Ghana line has filled out. Okay, so now before we turn to those who are here, let me just call on Kweku Dia. Kweku Dia is like the glue that keeps all the families scattered around the globe together from our secondary school. And he's part of the Friends of Sandy Springs Slave Museum. He's at the moment in Glasgow, and he has a few words to share. And at least in that context, he can be the voice of those in the diaspora, whilst we couldn't get all of them here. I know we went a little bit of the time. So Bakweku, we call him C-Man, just in case you're wondering if I should miss a slip and call him C. C, you have the floor.
Hello, thank you, Albert. By the way, I am in Cardiff, in Wales, not Glasgow. Still a Celtic nation. Yeah, thank you for the opportunity. Now, and good evening to everybody. When Albert asked me to become a friend of the museum, I couldn't refuse, because no one refuses Albert when it comes to these things. He's one of the most public-spirited people I've ever known. He's always organizing one thing or another. If it's not the Catholics, African Catholics in America, he's organizing, alumni of our old college, or he's organizing fancies or his own families, always organizing something, and I admire him very much for it. So when he asked me to join as a friend of the museum, I thought it was a laudable idea, because whatever Alan is involved in is for the public good. Now, Alan and I have known each other for decades, and we were in the same boarding school for 7 years. And every day of that year, whenever we were on campus, we'd be staring at the Atlantic Ocean, which was where many of your ancestors came from. But they were our ancestors too, not just yours. Now, in Africa, we say you don't have to come from the same womb to be a brother or sister. But in our case, all of you in the diaspora, we come from the same womb, that's Africa, that gave birth to all of us. Interestingly, the part of Ghana that I come from is in the hills, which is about 40 miles north of the capital, Accra. And there is a slave market there, dating back to the 16th century. Now, I sit here, and every time I see an African American or a West Indian or any Black from the diaspora, I always wonder, there's the same blood that's coursing through my vein, course through that person's vein too. Because by sheer coincidence, the fact that that slave market was located where my ancestors came from, chances are my ancestor or any ancestor of mine could also have been captured and sold from that market. And that is the blood ties that link all of us. And so when I heard the story of Galveston and the Juneteenth celebration, actually the first time I was hearing of it was when Alan set up the program and invited me to attend this evening. I never heard of Juneteenth before. I never heard of Galveston, and I never heard of General Granger. And I felt that actually today's lecture gave an insight into the struggle that Africans all over the world, United States, the West Indies, or in Africa, have gone through for a recognition, at least just a recognition and an acknowledgement of the wrong that they have suffered over the years. And so I'm so pleased and fortunate to be part of the celebration tonight. And I thank you all for making it a success. Thank you.
Thank you, Steve. Thanks, Steve. It's not Glasgow. My bias. It's Cardiff in Wales. The interesting thing, somebody wrote to me and I directed him to you, and he's from Glasgow. That's why I stuck in my mind. Thank you for that question. And what I would like us to do, because we have two other folks who are in Ghana, and I know their time and hanging on one of the conversations I've had with some of my African colleagues here is that many of us, when we have our internet connection, we have it paid. So when we are on Zoom, it's already paid for. But those who are calling in, every moment they stay on the line, they are paying, they are paying, they are paying. So, and then most often I'm not, they are also reluctant to say, well, let's cash in and say no. So we have two of them who are getting ready to celebrate a handing over. They have recruited me to help with the handing over tomorrow. That is the Queen Mother, Nana Sego, and the President-elect, Ben. I don't know whether, I know they are on, but I don't know whether they are on camera. Yeah, okay, Nana is on camera. What about Chateau Ben, the incoming president? Are you here? Right. You know, I mean, the intention is to acknowledge the fact that, yeah, I didn't want to, what I would say, they are yet to be installed. So I invited them just to be present and not to fall victim to preempting their presidency yet. So they're just saying hi. And when they get on board, August, you're inviting them to another event to say a word to us. But I think at this juncture, I will probably invite one alumni from the UCC to share a word or two. He, in his own capacity and as a member of our guest school, can say what he has to say without falling foul to the politics of leadership and elections. So Della, if you don't mind, please come to the floor. So Nana and Ben, I'll certainly give you at the time to have that. I promise. I know that elections that we conducted online ruffle some feathers, and I know the handing over is tomorrow. So I'll wait for that. And thank you for making time.
Albert, I was going to defer to the folks in Ghana because if there's anybody out there who wants to speak.
Not in Ghana. At the moment, those were the two, and I wanted them to be acknowledged. And,
Okay.
and you and I know the politics of stepping on toes sometimes is.
All right, so I wrote a few things down that when Albert invited me to come to this, to participate in this event, like Kokudia rightly said, when Albert invites you, you cannot say no. So given the short notice, this is something important to me, and you need to be here. You've got something to share with this audience. So here am I to share a few things with you. One, I would like to say begin my remarks by congratulating Sandy Springs Slave Museum for this event, putting this event, and also to salute them for what they are doing, trying to set up a big platform for folks, Africa and African Americans, to be able to begin a conversation and help us kind of build bridges, and but building bridges and help create common understanding among us. I want to say that I stand before you as a bridge builder, married into an African American family from Hineville, Georgia, for over 28 years until the good Lord called my wife home to glory. We began a cross-cultural conversations between us and our extended families, and this helped to promote understanding and also remove some of the barriers that Africans and African Americans have. We are all richer for our engagement. We are all richer for that engagement. And I believe that by building bridges and making such connections, we can mobilize ourselves to address some of the problems that plague our communities. There is an African proverb that I want to underscore, and it goes like this, that it takes two hands to generate an applause. So one community cannot do enough, but Africans in the diaspora and African, when we get together, we can generate a resounding applause. That is the story of Juneteenth. It's a story of what, not only of celebration, not only of remembrance, but it's also a story of a struggle and resilience. And I believe that if we harness or mobilize our resources to get our energies together, we'll be able to tackle most of the problems that confront us today. We know that the history of this country is not finished. There's a big unfinished business, and that's the business of addressing social justice issues, making sure that what we call a perfect union is achieved. All right, there's a big unfinished business, and we need to address that issue. We can only do that, as I indicated, by mobilizing our energies, our strengths, and tackling those issues. With numbers, there's no stopping us what we can do. We can do better. We'll be able to rise and bend the steel and cudgels of oppression, or put all the vestiges of baked-in structural racism, and kind of push us into a new dawn where we all share the same benefit, nobody is disadvantaged. The wealth of this country was generated on the back of slaves. And those wealth that have been generated have given some folks a leg start in this race. Some of us are never going to catch up. You know, you are handicapped. We know that if a Black man goes to a bank to get a loan, the rate of the loans is less. It's higher. The interest rate is higher than a white person. Okay, so we might have a wonderful business plan about the same idea, but it's going to take me twice as much work to be able to move my business, and it's going to be easy for the other person to get his business going. But somebody take a look, I just try to look at your business and say, you're not doing well. Oh, these folks are not moving, they're not working hard enough, because we cannot see how the other policies that have been baked into the system that handicap us, and we are therefore not able to push forward. That should be the struggle for us now. That for me is the unfinished business. And we can only get there by harnessing our energies, organizing, and also making sure that the stories that Mr. Smith was talking about, you got to keep it alive. We have to share our experiences with the younger generation. I mean, lit the fire on them, because when we're talking about the struggle is not a sprint. It's not going to end today. Some of us who are beginning the struggle now, we are not going to reap the benefits. We are not going to reap the benefit of the struggle, but we owe it to the folks yet unborn to get engaged in the struggle, because the ultimate goal is to leave this place a better place than we met it. That's what I have to share.
Thank you. Thank you. Bella and I are comrades now. God rest his soul, the wife passed away not long ago, a year ago. And then it was a family friend. So we're in this struggle together. There is a colleague from the UN NGO who is also online, Sophony. Sophony, are you still on? She is representing two organizations, one that she just freshly baked, and another one that we've been helping based in Cameroon, the Africa Development Interchange Network. Is Sophony? Let me see, my phone went appropriate. Yes, unmuted. Okay. And Sophie and I go way back. Yeah, and she and I worked when I was the chairperson of the Ecumenical Working Group at the United Nations. She was helping me make sure our records are straight. He was a secretary and he was a member of the United Methodist Women, and we've stayed in touch ever since. She started a new project. And now at the moment, what we are seeking to do is to ensure that the voices of Africa-based civil society organizations are heard at the UN. So we are representing them and preparing them, helping them do the ECOSOC and all that. And Sophony has offered to be a key part of that. Sophony, can we see you now? Your camera's going up again.
I wanted to stay off. Is it all right if I stay off? Okay, thank you. Thank you. Hello, good afternoon, good evening, everyone. Grace and peace be unto you from God our Father and the Lord Jesus Christ. So I greet you on behalf of the African Development Inter-Exchange Network, known as ADEN, and also on behalf of Hidden Halos Kingdom Assets. Thank you, Albert, for the invitation. Thank you, Cindy Williams, and all the coordinators of this commemorative celebration, awesome celebration. I am privileged to be here with everyone to commemorate Juneteenth, representing freedom. I pause to think about the work that yet remains to be accomplished even as we celebrate freedom. So I looked up the definition of freedom, and freedom is defined as power or right to act, speak, or think as one wants without hindrance or restraint. It is the state of not being imprisoned or enslaved. It is the state of being physically unrestricted and able to move easily. It is the state of not being subjected to or affected by a particular undesirable thing. It is the power of self-determination that is attributed to the will, the quality of being independent of fate or necessity. It is unrestricted use of something. It is the absence of subjection to foreign domination or dictatorial government. So I thought, you know, when I was asked to say something, and I said, you know what, I want to sort of refocus our thinking around the centerpiece of freedom. And if I had to give it a theme or a topic, I would say, free me, free us. So my question on today would be, as we celebrate freedom, how well or how effectively do we implement freedom? Now, stay with me, stay with me. So, to help us think a little bit deeper, you know, it's a wonderful thing to know that you're free, but there's different levels of freedom. As our historian mentioned earlier, that the slaves knew that they were freed, but at the same time, they were so restricted. You couldn't do this, you couldn't do that, you couldn't go where, you know, and then it paused to, you know, it kind of makes you wonder, well, then what is freedom? If I'm free, I'm said to be free, but I'm bound by the same things that I couldn't do, you know, when I was enslaved. So what is freedom? My question, you know, again would be, what do we bring to freedom as recipients of freedom? Because freedom carries advantages as well as responsibilities. And it is a relational thing. It's a relational thing to be free, to accept freedom. You have to accept freedom. You can be free and not accept freedom. You know, how to live out freedom and to implement freedom. What do we bring to freedom? How do we take freedom home with us? I say that we take freedom through our vision. We take freedom through our strength. We take freedom through our passion. We take freedom through love, freedom through each other, freedom through progress, plan, strategy, challenges, and change. We take in how we see God's glory manifested in our midst through our freedom and in our world. When you think about freedom and you think about the opposite of the things that lack of freedom generates, injustice, for instance. Injustice seeks to keep us bound. But God, our Creator, seeks to free us from injustice and from the inequalities that look to destroy us, even when some would even some would go as so far as to take Holy Scripture, the Holy Bible, and to restructure its intended meaning just to keep someone bound and to paralyze. The Bible records a story of a man laid on a bed, completely paralyzed, and how a few men looked to get him freed from paralysis, and by bringing him to Jesus for healing. And it's interesting enough, the text records how crowded it was, how they had no room to get through with the bed. The man was laying on the bed and they had to get him through. But when you look at the mindset and the mentality of freedom, these people who carried him through said, I want him to be free no matter the cost. So they became creative. We can't get through the crowd, which is the natural route to go. We're gonna go and we're gonna remove the rooftop. They removed the rooftop just to get the man through and tunneled him through the roof to get his freedom of healing. This is an account that teaches us that not even total infirmity or paralysis or all of the hindrances of all the challenges of all the attacks that comes our way should serve as a crutch from not accepting freedom, from not being freed, and from not wanting to be free. Again, the thought is, if I would ever leave anything with you and with us in our minds today, it would be free me, free us. How bad do we want freedom? How bad do you want freedom for yourself and for others? Our faith is a vital part of freedom. Our faith in God is what anchors us to produce movement and changes. And that's why even throughout history, faith and God's word was taken and restructured, reinterpreted to do harm and evil, because faith is so powerful. And the perpetrators of freedom, trying to remove freedom and take away freedom, knew the power of faith.
So funny.
Yes, sir.
I was trying to use the diplomatic channel. Technology has failed me. The personal message I sent to you is on here. What I failed to mention is that she's from Haiti, and you can sense in her voice that the struggle and the pain that their country has faced is still right in there, and he will take us to church anytime you give her the chance. So thank you very much for coming on. We seeking to create an opportunity for folks to drive back, but rest assured, you are coming back here, and I wanted you to be here physically as you have promised, and it will happen very soon. So thank you very much for making time to join us today, in regards to all the folks out there in New York.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much. And like Ray said before he left, this is just the beginning. I know I'll pull you all here with one agenda or the other. The original intention was for us to break bread and start strategizing as to what we want to do, rather than have long conversation. And I had a conversation with the president of the African Catholics in the DLE, but I did was it yesterday or this evening? Yes, yesterday. And we were talking about the fact that we haven't created enough space to have that conversation about our role and the politics of the church. And so we need to create more of those. So what the space here is offering, and Sandy, at least I'm over having it all recorded. They're all busy multitasking. As you heard, when the museum closed, they were getting drained financially. We had to figure out ways of going, sustaining the space. But I also believe, as many have said before, it takes a team to get this going, and we are all coming together. And I would say, this is our hope. If you have any idea and how this space could be used to move and advance our agenda, put it on the table. I live not too far away. It took me, Shana, 3-4 years before I finally came in here. Keep me telling me, come back this way, come back. It took the pandemic, but the reason for me was that it wasn't something that I can just dip my toe in. As the old African saying goes, you don't test the depth of the water with both feet. You know, you test it one and see, well, are you going to sink or are you going to survive? And I've been moving it out, and I'm pleased to say that, look, this is a space that is going to welcome us. And Ray has shown it. He's combining his agenda with coming here to just talk to us. So I had Sister Dorothy on the line. She had a prayer for us. I don't know whether it showed up here. She wanted to say a prayer. She's driving to the airport, and I wanted her to close us. But if she can, then Emilia, since you didn't get a chance to do, I would ask you to lead us in a closing prayer, as we began by prayer from our pastor from Ethiopian community. I know we need to do a thank you to each other, but Emilia.
Do it the African way.
Very much so. Okay.
I'm trying not to speak. I'm really honored to be here. To see family that I haven't seen in so long and to meet new family. So thank you for today. It's been enlightening, it's been inspiring, it's been amazing. And thank you for all who've taken time to join us from all different parts of the world. So, you know, I come with my auntie. Because Madam Bryant is brilliant, wise beyond measure, and she was sitting next to me. So if I'm gonna do this, she's coming with me. So you will dance? Oh, wow.
So whatever your prayer is, I can take it.
You want to stand up for a short prayer, probably? You can, if you are able.
Can. And we pray, we know that there are all different traditions, those joining us online, those joining in this room. Some are Catholic, some are Methodist, some are other faith traditions. But with all our faith, with all our spirituality, with the power of the ancestors, we come together to say thank you. The Father, the Son, the Holy Spirit, in the name of the Father, the Mother, the Creator. We say thank you to the ancestors who fought to bring an end to slavery, fought for a vision of a better day for their children and their children's children. From Texas to the Congo, they visioned a better day. We come together today to say thank you to them. Thank you to the mothers for the tears. Thank you to the fathers for fighting back. Your resistance has gotten us to today. We know in the spirit of Sankofa, the Agam tradition, we fly forward, looking back. We must know from whence we come, and we thank all of those who created this museum, who fought to make it happen, who visioned a connection, building bridges across families, across communities, across the world. We pray that being inspired by all we've heard today, we will go forward. We will continue to live the dreams of our ancestors. We will continue to look 7 generations down to protect the land, to protect the water, the seeds, the food that will nourish those that are still to come. So we pray for all whose hands have come together today for all whose hands will continue to lift up our community until we all are truly free. Amen.
Amen, 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 amen. Thank you. I should. Thank you.
Wow.
Okay, folks, we'll catch up. Kofi, Kweku and Kofi and Seko, thank you for holding on. Albert, can you put it on grid so that I can see and all those? Oh, you want to get Judy over there? And unmute everybody in the camera. Yeah. And I'm Seattle. I know we have. Oh, Dot, you are still on. Okay. Good to see you. Ashibodi. Okay. And of course, Lambert is there.
Nicely done. Thank you.
Sorry, I'm at the airport and there's so much noise. That's why I didn't want to mute myself, but it was a beautiful prayer and thank you for putting this together.
We will stay in connection. Now you have our contact. We want to make sure this is just the beginning. And thank you for making time as soon as possible.
Okay. Love to all. Thank you.
Okay.
For everybody who worked on the program.
Yes.
Wow, hats off to you.
We're going to get back to you. We're going to get to work as soon as possible. We need to get this going. Thank you all for showing up.
Thank you. We're so grateful.
We look forward to working to the next date is August, but I'll send all the details very soon. And I think our brothers and sisters tomorrow in Ghana, they have a handover, and I'm prepared to do my bit to make it happen. Yeah, see you go. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.
Bye. I will only say one step for the museum, one giant leap for Africa.
Thank you, Seko.